And now, item number 3 on the agenda is to review, revise, and approve the agenda. And there is one modification to the agenda that is really more kind of a typo than anything, but on page 4 of the agenda, the little letter 5, the V, it says that the documents supporting that topic begin on page 42, but they really begin on page 44. And on 6, the little VI, it says they start on 44, but they're the ones that actually start on 42 and 43. So they just those numbers got transposed. And then as to the last 4 items we're going to be talking about, which are first readings of several policies, there are some typos and some other more substantive things that I'm going to have us look at, but I'm going to save that for when we get to them. If we try to do it now and then jump back again, it would be kind of crazy. So there will be a few more changes to just the language in the recommendations and even some of the wording that are typos, but we'll deal with it when we're on that specific proposed board policy. So then we move on to item number 4, which is to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of August 14th, 2018. They are found at page 5 and carrying on from there. Is there any correction or addition, or did anyone notice? Seeing no one raising their hand, then is there a motion to approve the minutes from the regular meeting from August 14th? Moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Kendall. All in favor of approving the minutes from the August 14th meeting, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present, Lenora. Then we move on to the special meeting to set the budget on August 20th, 2018, which are found on page 11. Any correction or additions to that anyone noticed? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the minutes from the special meeting from August 20th? Moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Duggar. All those in favor of approving the minutes from the special meeting of August 20th, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. Now we come to a portion of each school board meeting. Under the Open Meetings Act, we allow public comment at the beginning, and this board actually allows it at the end of every meeting. Public comment at this time is on non-agenda items. That means it's something that we're not currently going to be discussing at this meeting, because we would take your comments on that topic at this meeting. But if there's anything of interest that you think the school board or the school district needs to know about, we'd ask you to come to the podium, press the button to get the red light on, state your name. If you represent an organization, identify the organization. And we do ask to keep your comments for about 3 minutes, just in case there are some meetings where there's more comment than less. So we try to be standard in terms of making sure that everyone gets at least 3 minutes to comment. So go ahead.
Hi, my name's Richard Wheeler. I recently retired from Sentinel High School. I spent over 20 years there. And I came to talk about some safety issues that I have talked about to superiors for a year and a half now, almost a year and a half, 16 months, on roof access ladder cages that we don't have. So when we have guys up on the roof in the winter and they come down with snow on their feet, they're coming down a bare ladder. And there should be a cage there. We also have to go up and down and use both hands to unlock the lock. So if we slip, there's nothing to catch us. Also, our handrails on our bleachers, we've got 2 or 3 that are horrible. I mean, we used to have Brad Douglas at our school, probably the second naturally strongest person I ever knew. So it wasn't horrible because we had him there to wrestle those out. They don't have him there anymore. And so I'm just hoping that maybe in the next couple of months we could start to address this, because those people over there deserve it. They really do. They're going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get hurt. And you know, just about everywhere else I go and I see roof access ladders, I see cages around them. Refineries, every refinery I was ever in, ladders had cages around them. So anyway, that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you. And just for student trustees and others here who are familiar with public comment on non-agenda items, we don't discuss it at this time because it wasn't noticed up to the public that the board itself would be discussing the item, but it might be something that you'll get a call from the superintendent on. It might be something that you'll see on a later board agenda because it is something the board wants to discuss. So the fact that we take the public comment on non-agenda items without any discussion from the board doesn't mean that it will be addressed at a later time in some fashion. So I just wanted to let everyone know that's how this aspect of the meeting works. But thank you very much.
Oh, and by the way, thank you, student trustees. You're going to find out sometimes that you're pretty smart.
Any other public comment on non-agenda items?
Good evening. Melanie Charleston, Field Consultant, Montana Federation of Public Employees. I haven't had a chance to meet with you, I don't think, since July, and I wanted to come by this evening for a couple of items. I would be remiss if I didn't use part of my 3 minutes for a little political commentary. Ballot initiatives often don't get the recognition as named candidates do in elections, but there's a very important initiative on the November ballot, the I-186, the 6 mil levy that will fund our university systems. This is a 6 mil levy that has been in place since 1948, and it is not a new tax. It is a continuation of a strong tradition of funding our higher ed institutions in Montana. If you are in need of a sign, we have them at our office at 1001 Southwest Higgins. We have several, so come on down, get some for you and your neighborhood, and let's work to get 186 passed. I have shifted positions as of September 4th. I have stepped down as Missoula EA president, and I have retired, which is odd to say, from Missoula County Public Schools. I wanted to take a moment to share with you, I have had the go-ahead to continue working on our NEA Network Improvement Community Project. So I do get to remain with that project as that moves forward. I'm thrilled with that opportunity to see all of our certified hires receive a mentor. I believe every certified hire has been assigned a mentor for this year, which I believe is pushing 65-ish certified hires in multiple job categories. So I think that is an amazing accomplishment that we have all worked on together, and thrilled to see that starting fresh this fall. My successor will be Greg Imhoff, the Missoula Education Association president. Greg comes to you with 20 years experience in the district, both at the middle school and the elementary level, and he's hitting the ground running, which is great. So I really want to take a moment and thank you all. 28 years in this district has been phenomenal. Middle school time up at Rattlesnake, very wonderful years, strong colleague memories up there, amazing students coming through there. Went through the closure of that as a middle school and transferred to Chief Charlo, where I got to work with Mr. Thane as my principal and giving me evaluations on bulletin boards and all sorts of entertaining items. And the wrong Danielian penmanship on my board. It was a fun memory. Fabulous principal to work for, though, and I've had a great opportunity to work with Mark as a principal and HR director and as the super, and thank you. Thank you so much, Mark, for all of those years. Truly memorable. This district has provided lots of opportunity for professional growth, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I thank you, board members, for your service. You've been open to conversations. You have been open to phone calls, and all of us moving together to improve the education for our students. Cabinet members, I want to thank you as well for allowing me to have conversations and move forward in what is in the best interest of our employees and our district. So it has been phenomenal. I'm not going to be very far away. I'm across the hall from my office, so come by, say hey. I will be working with certified and classified locals, 24 of them, from Darby to Alberton. Missoula EA and MMCO are on my list to be working with, so you may see me from time to time, but truly grateful for this time here. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
I'll be fast. I just want to introduce myself so you don't see some weird guy just sitting in the corner every meeting now that I get to come to. Yeah, so I took over for Melanie. I'm Greg Imhoff. I've been a teacher at Meadow Hill, Lowell, Washington, and I have 21 years in. And this was the first year without a classroom, which has been weird. So I've been going to schools and kind of going on the playground, and I know that's kind of weird, but just to get the, like, hey, there's kids still. So if you need anything, and I'll be here, but I'm next door to Melanie, which is good because she can inform me of everything. So again, Greg Imhoff, thank you for all what you guys do.
Thanks. Any other public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, then we move on to agenda item number 6, which are reports and announcements. The first is 6A, introduction of student trustees. And rather than me just reading your names, why don't, if you don't mind, and you have to push a button to get a red light to turn on, if you can just let us know which school you represent, what year in school you are, and just something interesting about you so that we will be able to keep that face with that name. So if you don't mind starting on the end, and then I'll introduce Seeley Swan because they're on the saucer.
First.
Okay, everybody ready?
Yes. Yep, we can hear you.
My name is Chance Johnson. I am a senior at Sept High School. I've been a part of the football, basketball, and track programs for all 4 of my years here at Sept. I'm also a member of our Cedar Lake Leos Club, which is an extension off of our Lions Club here in town. I really enjoy hunting and outdoor activities like hiking and fishing, and I'm excited to take on this role for my school.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm Ashley. I'm also a senior here. I've played sports as well. I've done volleyball, basketball, and track all 4 years. I'm a part of the Leos Club too. I'm the president, and yeah, I just like to be involved in things. So I'm excited to be a part of the Board of Trustees. Yeah, that's about it.
Hi, I'm Lyra Oderman. I'm from Willard Alternative High School. I'm part of the Willard Wire, the journalism thing. And I know Japanese, and I've been to Japan. So that's what I do in my free time, is learn Japanese.
Thank you. And if you want to just scoot that one over, they kind of wiggle. You can actually just move the...
Oh, the thing, yeah.
You guys will get used to that.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Brookie Gee. I'm here to represent Big Sky, but the 2 that usually will be here were not able to make it due to an appointment and 2 appointments. So you'll get to meet them probably next time, but I'm here for them. I'm a senior, and I play tennis. That's my sport. I'm the president of Key Club. I'm a member of the Health Science Academy, and I'm an ambassador for them. And I'm also the senior class president this year for Big Sky. And yeah, I'm excited to be here today. So.
Awesome. I'm Miles Miller. I'm the captain of my cross-country team. I'm also the executive of HOSA, which is a health science club at Hellgate. I'm also the vice president of my school. And I'm also involved in National Honor Society and the St. Pat's Junior Board, which is just volunteering, and we're raising money for First Step. And I'm really excited to be here, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Maddie Braun. I'm a senior at Sentinel High School, and I do legislative debate, and I'm also on the Missoula Education Foundation, which I know just started working with the Board of Trustees. So I'm really excited to be on this board as well this year.
Thank you so much for all being here and for great introductions. And so now, let's just go down the line. So Seeley Swan, do you guys want to tell us what's been going on up at Seeley during the beginning of your academic year?
Well, as far as I can think of, our volleyball and football seasons have been going well so far. We have a blood drive tomorrow, so that'll be good. The bread truck will come down. We have quite a few kids who are going to give blood tomorrow. Is there anything else you can think of? Cross country is also doing well. We just have cross country and volleyball and football during the fall. They had a meet today, and then volleyball have a game on Thursday and Saturday. Football has a home game on Friday as well.
Anything else?
That's pretty
That's
much
about it. Not much going on in here.
It's just harder to see those visual cues when you're not here. So, and what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
All right, nice to meet you all. I hope you guys don't mind I wrote it down.
Oh, that's really
Okay. Our brand new building is being installed. We hope to move in there next trimester. I'm really excited for the brand new classrooms. We have a Chili Feed coming this Thursday from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. This is an event where parents, siblings, students, teachers, and neighbors come together and eat chili that the teachers have made. It's an exciting and fun event that brings everyone together. David Simmons, the brother of J.K. Simmons, I believe, he is coming to our very own school to do a workshop for the next 3 days. It's a songwriting workshop, and it's meant to have the students all work together to create an anthem for our school. The Willard Wire is making a huge turnaround this year with 11 new students arriving in the class. They're attentive, creative, and ready to contribute to making a good paper this year. We can't wait to unveil this brand new paper to you all. We plan on focusing more on our local community and what's going on in it. We also plan on giving the artists at Willard more of an outreach by featuring their art in our paper more often than we used to. The neighborhood cleanup is coming up. I couldn't remember which date it was, so I didn't write that down, but this is where every student at Willard attends and cleans up garbage around the neighborhood. Thank you so much for listening.
I apologize for using my phone, but I took notes on it about what I wanted to talk about, so I'm not texting. But sports-wise, we're doing well. Our football team had their first win last Friday, which was very exciting for them. But I think one of the more new and exciting things about football this year is we've just had a really great student section. We had a neon out last Friday, which was really fun, and really good attendance. We also had a tailgate party that was very successful with pizza when we played Sentinel, and I think it's just helped bring the school together. Soccer's been going on as well as cross country. Last Saturday, cross country went to the Highlander race, I believe in Spokane, and 5 of our team members were in the top 20, which was really exciting. The team also grew by 15 students this year, and so there's about 60 kids on their team, and they were able to take a trip to Silverwood, so they're going places. Volleyball plays Flathead tonight, which is super exciting. They also participated in the Great Falls tournament last weekend, and they're going to be playing Glacier at Glacier this coming Saturday. Golf, I don't know as much about, but I do know that they have a tournament coming up and that they are doing really well. Academics-wise, the Health Science Academy just had an opening social that went very well. They've begun to start organizing job shadows for the kids to select a profession that they want to look at, and it doesn't even have to be in the health career, so that's very exciting for those students. The IB program is going really well. The IB students are getting a painting done of the IB learner profile on one of the storage bins, and so that's a big project coming up for them, and testing registration has also started. Senior projects we've begun, and it's been a big deal, and so everyone's just kind of still deciding on their projects, but you can definitely feel things moving along as we had an assembly just for the seniors to talk about them. Extracurriculars in student government, we did weed pulling and swept the sidewalks to do some outdoor cleanup. Key Club has just started up and is talking about working on a thirst project, so helping I don't remember exactly what country it is, but a country in Africa, we're raising money to build wells in that country for them. An open house will be happening tomorrow at Big Sky at 6 to 7:30, and at 5 o'clock they're going to be starting a showing for the show Screenagers, which is all parents and students, I'm pretty sure, are invited to attend, and it's a documentary about screens and how they're affecting our teenagers. And that kind of leads into a big change that's happened this year. This year we introduced, or the staff introduced a policy where every time you walk into a classroom, there's a case, I guess, that every student walks in and is immediately supposed to put their phone into, and if their phone is ever seen with them during the class period, they're immediately given a referral to go to the office. I don't remember the exact name of the referral, but essentially it's a detention. And it's actually, from my experience, at least in my class, has gone very well. I've actually really appreciated it and felt like we've done a better job, especially at being able to utilize our phones for like more productive things, since our time on our phones is more limited. Also, new things that have happened is we've got gates in the Big Sky parking lot and parking passes. So far that has gone well, though it hasn't been something that I've noticed a lot. DECA's been going on, which is like the in-school store, and they do business clubs. And then Connection Crew at the beginning of the year did really well. They gave tours. A trip to France and Italy is being planned that 40 travelers have already signed up for over spring break, and so that's in Segway, and that's super exciting. Otherwise, the atmosphere of Big Sky's changed a little bit. We got new murals painted all over the halls by one of my classmates. Her name's Sophie. She's an amazing artist, and it looks great. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
So Hellgate's actually doing really great. We've had a lot of big changes to our building, specifically our construction, as you all probably know. Our construction will actually be finished by the end of the year. And the biggest change in the construction that was implemented was our new commons area, which features places for students to hang out, as well as a new library. And to match these changes, our faculty has introduced some new policies, the most major being our new yellow lines that students can't cross during break periods. In the past, Hellgate students have kind of sat in the hallways during passing periods, but now they're required to stay within this commons area that we have now. This has actually made the jobs of our custodians much easier, as they no longer have to clean the hallways as thoroughly as before. On the student side of things, clubs and activities have really been picking up. Both our boys and girls cross-country teams are doing really well. Our girls varsity and JV actually beat Bozeman for first place for the first time in 11 years last Saturday. Bozeman was actually in the top 5 in the nation last year, so it's super impressive. Volleyball is doing moderately well. I'm not quite sure. And boys and girls soccer are likely to both win another state championship this year. Our football team has still yet to win a game, but they're remaining very positive and optimistic anyway, which is really great. For clubs, many are just having their first meetings this week. We have really great student involvement in all of our clubs. We have a large variety ranging from clubs like NHS and HOSA for the more academically inclined students, and clubs like the Thespians Club for the more artistic ones. But most relevant to the school are the changes that we are making for student government. As a student body vice president, I've actually been working really hard with our new advisor and as well as our student body president in order to make changes that we've always wanted for the club. In the past, student government has been super passive in our school in terms of student involvement and student voice, but this year we want to make it a lot more central to Hellgate activity. To do this, we've gotten permission from our principal as well as other clubs in order to make it the only club that meets on Wednesdays so that everyone can join if they'd like to without conflict from other clubs. We're also implementing a half credit for all the members in student government who are actively involved, and we're currently formulating criteria for that as well. As for our agenda, we are still unsure. This week, on Wednesday, we're having our first meeting, and we intend on planning all of our homecoming activities. We're hoping that we're going to kick off a really nice year at Hellgate.
All right, good evening. Although school has only been in session for a few weeks, Sentinel students are already excelling. Our fall sports are in full swing as practices began in August. This year's cross-country team has already competed in 2 successful meets. At the first Missoula meet, Kendall Quindry placed first in varsity girls, and McKay Hunter placed first in varsity boys. And at last week's meet in Kalispell, Noah McNellis placed first in JV boys. Cross-country will compete at Fort Missoula this Thursday at 3 o'clock. The Sentinel golf team has also performed exceptionally at their first 3 invitationals. At the Great Falls Invite, boys took second and girls took fifth, with Jack Johnston in first place. At the Missoula Invite, boys took first and girls took second, with Emily Garden in first place. And at the Fairmont Invite, boys took fourth and girls took fifth. Sentinel soccer this year boasts a full team and has played 4 games this season, and varsity soccer played today at the Missoula Fields against the Glacier Wolfpack at 3:30 and 5:30. Our Special Olympians began basketball practice last week with the goal of competing in the state tournament, which will be held in Helena from November 8th to the 10th. 23 Sentinel students were accepted into the All-State Music Festival, including 8 students in orchestra, 8 in band, and 7 in choir. This year's All-State Festival will be held in Missoula from October 17th to the 19th. Sentinel's football team has also performed well this season. Some highlights include beating Billings Skyview in a 52-7 win and beating Big Sky 26-6 in a crosstown game. Sentinel students will show their school spirit this week as we prepare for Friday's homecoming game against Flathead High. Student government has assigned a spirited theme to each day this week, including Decades Day, USA Day, and Purple and Gold. The homecoming game will be held at the Washington Grizzly Stadium at 7 p.m. on Friday. Sentinel will hold an open house this Wednesday from 6:30 to 8 p.m., and faculty will be available to answer questions from parents, and students will have the opportunity to learn more about the athletic and academic activities offered at Sentinel, including information on the second year of the successful AP Diploma program, as Sentinel is currently the only high school in Montana that's offering the full AP Capstone curriculum. We are looking forward to the new school year and commend Sentinel on Spartan excellence. Thank you.
And as I mentioned, you're welcome to stay as long as you'd like, but if you need to get going, it's perfectly fine. I'll throw out one additional thing. We tried to buy you dinner because you were coming here during dinner, so if you want to grab a sandwich and some fruit as you leave, we would love to have it go home with you guys. But thank you for being here. Now we'll move on to 6C, which is announcements from Superintendent Thane.
I really don't know how you expect me to follow all that. I would be remiss, though, if I didn't again congratulate staff on a wonderful opening to the school year. We had 3 days of contract time or PIR time with teachers to prep for the school year, some professional development activities, some time to set classrooms, and some time for building to conduct the very important business to structure for success for the school year. We've opened the school year with, again, increased enrollments. The K-8 district is up about 73 students from last year. We're still working on the 9-12 enrollment, but it appears it will also be up, and we hope to have those figures by next Friday. The range in size of our schools is somewhat dramatic. Sealy Swan opened with 87 students this year, so by far our smallest school. And Sentinel is at approximately 1,290 as our largest school, so quite a demographic there. We have, of course, had a number of construction projects, 10 facilities under construction this summer. One that's of particular note is the Russell School project is complete. We will actually hold a community open house Thursday night, September 16th from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Certainly trustees and the public are welcome to view the new facility, and I think you'll be really pleased with what's transpired. This is also Suicide Awareness and Prevention Week, and again, we as a district have undertaken a lot of activity with regard to the educational side as well as staff education on suicide awareness and prevention, and it was referenced in the student trustee reports. A former classmate of mine, David Simmons, will spend 3 days workshopping at Willard and then present a community presentation on Friday evening. We are also opening an early kindergarten program, and I included an item on the agenda later on so that trustees could have some conversation about it if you do have questions. So I'll give an update on that program a little bit later on. Our total enrollment at this point, we're projecting to be at about 9,200 students, which is a continued growth, about our 6th consecutive year of growing enrollments. As was referenced by Melanie in her comments, we have 65 new certified staff and about 80 new classified staff. So significant number of new employees out of a population of about 1,100 employees. What's new this year, as Melanie again referenced, we do have a mentor assigned to each of those new staff members, and that's a result of the work that the union and administration have been doing as part of our collaboration with the NEA, New Teacher Center, and the Carnegie Foundation, and we're really pleased to kick that off. The teachers that are serving as mentors get a small token of compensation, but I think what is most important is they're investing in the future of our district and the future of their profession, and I really appreciate their efforts to help onboard and make sure that we support new teachers so that they have a good experience in Missoula County Public Schools. A couple items just in terms of the calendar. Again, we'll have our 2nd September board meeting Tuesday, September 25th in this room. The Tuesday, October 9th board meeting, we'll travel to Seeley Lake and they will host us. We'll have then the Montana Conference of Education Leadership being held here in Missoula. It's been in Billings for the past several years. We'll host it in Missoula the 18th and 19th of October. And of course, Ann Wake is serving as president right now of the School Boards Association. So on the way out. Again, if you have questions about these items, there are a listing of events on page 15 in the packet. Thank you.
Thanks. And now we move on to 6D. Any announcements from any trustees? See none. Then we move on to 7, which is the consent agenda. For those who haven't been at a meeting before, this is a procedure in accordance with the board policy that allows the board to place on consent agenda items that we see on a regular basis, usually monthly, which don't require a lot of board discussion, so we can place them on the consent agenda and there won't be any board discussion, although certainly we allow public comment. Any trustee has the ability to ask that an item to be taken off of board of the consent agenda if they want to have some discussion on the item. So these are the items where it's something that we see routinely and it's pretty perfunctory decision-making. So this month it's to approve the MCPS student attendance agreements, which these are the students who are residents of our district and are requesting to go to another school district, and related to that, or the parallel of that, is 2, which is to approve out-of-district attendance agreements, which is to approve students outside the district who want to attend the district here. And so is there a motion to approve the 2 items on the consent agenda? Moved by trustee Kendall, seconded by, is there a second? Oh, okay, sure. Do you want to take something off the consent agenda?
No, I guess I just wanted to comment on something on the consent agenda. Do I wait till after the motion? I wanted to say something.
Yeah, you have to take it off the consent agenda if you want to say anything. So is it item 1 or item 2? Or both? It's fine.
Okay, then let's take item 1 off. I understand how we have to be very careful with the names, but I just would like to take item 1 off the consent agenda.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and vote on item 2 since that's still on the consent agenda, and then we'll move the item 1 topic to stay in the same location on the agenda, but it will no longer be on the consent agenda. Does that work for you?
Well, item 1 and item 2 go hand in hand.
Pardon?
Well, item 1 and item 2 are
Okay, so we'll
both sides
take
of the
them
same
both
coin.
off. Okay, so now they're not on the consent agenda, so they're on the agenda. So we'll treat them as 2 separate items now that they're not on the consent agenda. So item 1, we never got a second, so we're good. Yeah, without a second, the motion failed. So the recommendation for 1 is that the trustees approve the attached list of students requesting to attend other school districts. Is there a motion to approve the list of students? Moved by trustee Smith. we're going to do them separately since they're not on the consent agenda, but they become two separate. Right, so we're voting on the second? Just the first item. Yes. Diane wants to talk about both, or trustee Lorenzen wants to talk about them because they really are complementary to each other. Okay, so now that they're not on the consent agenda, we treat them as any normal agenda item, so we deal with them individually. Okay, so moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second to the motion? Seconded by trustee Smith. Now there's time for board discussion.
Well, I guess these don't worry me as much. You know, these are simply students that are leaving our district to go to someone else's district, and then the next one will be students that are coming into our district. And I'm sure there's individual reasons on each one, but I think we have to be very cognizant of patterns in these actions. So we're seeing some out-migration to Hellgate Elementary. We don't have target ranges list yet, I guess. And although I understand that schools are different, I think sometimes, well, we just want to be good neighbors. So I'm not so concerned about the ones that are going from us to Hellgate Elementary. But I do want to say something about the number that are coming in from out of district. So I'll save that for the second vote.
Any other board discussion? I'll just point out one thing. Unless the policy at Hellgate Elementary has recently changed, Hellgate Elementary is a closed school district, so unless you're a teacher there with a child who might be going to a different school, who wants to come with a parent to go to school, that's typically why you see one of the students from MCPS going to Hellgate Elementary, because it's a K-8 school district, and it usually requires that an employee of the district is making the request to have their child come, because it's otherwise a closed district. So just because that's my district, I know that's what their policy has been. Okay, so any other board discussion on item 7A1? Trustee Decker? Here, let me scoot this.
Since we opened it, just a question about if a student does leave MCPS to go to another district, but then the next year, say, or even mid-year, wants to come back, is it, there certainly is no guarantee that there would be a space at the elementary school or middle school or so on that they wanted to go to. They would have run the risk at that point of being leveled to another building. And would that be the case from year to year also, et cetera?
Any student who's a resident of the district can enroll in our schools at any time. So if they chose to elect another school district, but then later determined they want to enroll in our district, we obviously honor that. As you referenced, we do have presently 13 classrooms, K through 5, that exceed state accreditation standards. If they happen to be in one of those schools at the critical grade level, there's a chance that they would be leveled out until space became available in their neighborhood school at that grade level.
Any other board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the attached list of students requesting to attend other school districts, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to 7A2, which is to approve out-of-district attendance agreements. The recommendation is that the trustees approve the attached out-of-district attendance agreements. Any questions first? A question, Mike, or trustee Smith?
Sorry about that. Okay, well, I guess since we're opening this up and we're taking questions first before discussion, do we have a policy of admitting kids from other districts or limiting that? Like as Marcia mentioned, for Hellgate being a closed district.
We do admit out-of-district students by policy. However, there is a tuition charge. If they reside in a district other than Missoula County Public Schools, the tuition calculation is basically a charge in lieu of taxes that would be paid by residents of the district. We actually this year severely limited the out-of-district requests. It is, one of the caveats we attach is there has to be space available at the requested schools. So there are some students who may be on these lists who have been in our district for years or may have parents who are faculty members, there may be a history. But in terms of new enrollments, et cetera, we have severely limited that. And there are cases where, because space was not available, even those that may have historically attended as out-of-district students were denied this year.
Any other questions for the administration? Trustee Lorenzen?
Yeah, I see on the list of high school, I guess, I want us to be good neighbors. I see 8 students out of Florence. Are we being good neighbors to let that happen to Florence and to Stevensville? I guess, is this a, you can't say anything about students, I know that. Is there a real academic reason for this, or is this a trend or a fad, or?
Yeah, I really can't respond to that, but I will make one general comment, and this is born more on my experience as a building administrator than superintendent, and that is, there are a lot of parents who work in the Missoula community, and they oftentimes want to have their children in schools in closer proximity to where they work. So oftentimes, as an elementary principal at Chief Charlotte, we would have people who may reside way down the Bitteret who didn't want to be 50 miles away from their kid in case of an emergency, so they would request an out-of-area placement. Once those out-of-district students become integrated with a cohort, they tend to want to stay until they graduate. So I think that's part of the history we see. I have not had any feedback from any of the surrounding districts that has expressed concern, and statutorily they should be reviewing in and out of district requests just as we do.
Any other trustee questions for the administration? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the attached out-of-district attendance agreements? Moved by trustee Smith. Is there a second? Seconded by trustee Newbold. Is there any board discussion? Okay.
Sorry, thank you for the leeway. Does the tuition do we get A and B for these students? Yes. 2. Okay, so we get the A and B and we get the tuition. Okay.
Any other board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the out-of-district attendance agreements attached to the agenda, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. Now we move on to 8, which is new business. A1 is teaching and learning, and Mrs. Allen has a grant application summary that's been submitted by Carol Ewing. And if you want it, it's attached on page 22, but if you want to point out any specific important aspects of it, please do.
This is just part of the support that the Office of Public Instruction gives to the district for multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. You've heard it as Montana Behavioral Initiative in the past. MTSS is moving toward a braiding of the academics and the behavior and not having them as separate as they have been in the past. This funds a half-time person who is a social worker in half of her life, and then the other half of her life, she's a coach for the teams in the buildings from K through 12.
Any questions for Karen? Trustee Smith, and then is it trustee Beers or just helping trustee Smith get a microphone?
That's good. Thanks. I just want to make sure I'm understanding straight. The halftime of one person for all the buildings in the district?
That's correct. Plus Carol Ewan, who is one of our school psychs and oversees the programs that relate to behavior support.
So she'll be helping Carol and this new half-time person
Right.
work as a team
Right.
to support the district-wide program. I'm just picturing one person kind of popping from building to building, but I think it's more, we could say it's more district-wide as opposed to.
Right, and there's training that goes on, so sometimes people come to her. Today, for example, she was training bus drivers for the Beach Bus Company. We've been really working hard to try to help make buses safer, so she's kind of in lots of places.
Great, I appreciate that, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the grant application summary that's found on page 22, moved by trustee Wake and seconded by trustee Decker? Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of granting, or of approving the grant application summary, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to 8A2, which is to request an exception to Board Policy 3110, which is to grant a waiver of an age limitation for a student who will be turning 19 but still wants to graduate. And so that requires the trustees grant a waiver of age limitation for the student identified by initials in the agenda. Anything to add to that, Karen?
I think that this is a situation, and I think we really appreciate the board supporting young people who may have had barriers to finishing school in the normal way. And this young woman has quite a few resources wrapped around her, including community and education. And I think her wanting to come and finish is a testimony to community support.
Trustee Wake?
Is she presently 18 and going to be 19 when she graduates? Is that what it is?
Yes.
So she's...
Actually, she's 19. She will be 19 at the beginning of the year. We have to come for board approval when they turn 19.
So this year she's going to turn 19?
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee?
So, do we need to have approval for students that started school when they were 16, that are 6 years old, and when they're graduating, a lot of them are 19, or if, you know, they flunk a year and they're going to be 19? So do we have to authorize that all of these students are able to graduate?
So we do not get funding for students who turn 19 on or before September 10th. So this is a situation where a student essentially begins the school year, is 19. We as a district are not willing to cut her off. We want to support her through graduation, even though we won't be able to collect A and B for her. There will be a far greater number of students who will be 19 at the time they graduate, but that doesn't matter as long as they were 18 before, or on September 10th. So they can turn 19 during the school year. It's just those who are either less than 5 on September 10th or greater than 19 on September 10th that need to come before the board.
Okay. Any other questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to grant the waiver of an age limitation for the student identified by initials? Moved by trustee Duggar and seconded by trustee Decker. Is there any board discussion? I'll just echo, oh, go ahead.
Oh, just that this is something that we have seen come before the legislature a couple of times, and this board has been strongly in support of not having to vote on these case by case.
That's what I was going to say. It would be nice that the legislature fund students up until the age of 19, up until the end of the school year. So hopefully they'll perhaps reach the better decision in this next legislative session. Any other board comment? Any public comment? Oh, I'm sorry. Michael, or trustee Beard?
Yeah, I would just add on to that, and it's been said before, but in addition to being in front of our state legislature multiple times, we're one of only 2 states in the country that have limits that low. The national standard is 20. So.
Thanks. Yes, public comment?
I'll add one public comment. We do have as a legislative item, both through our state organizations and through the AA principles, a proposal to support A and B funding for 19-year-olds, and also to raise the dropout age from 16 to 18. And the AA superintendents are actually meeting this Sunday in Bozeman, and we're going to work on our legislative agenda. Sure, A and B, average number belonging. It's our enrollment count, and that's how the state funds us, based on that enrollment. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of granting the waiver of the age limitation for the student identified in the agenda, please indicate by raising your hand. And that is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to 8B1, which is to award a bid for Willard Alternative High School.
We skipped a pretty important topic, sorry.
Oh, which one? Oh dear, the early childhood. We missed a really important topic. It's not in big letters. I apologize. A3, which is, as Superintendent Thane indicated earlier, an update on the early kindergarten program progress.
Thank you. So you'll recall that we asked trustees to review our policy regarding early education programs last spring to set the stage for us to consider opening an early kindergarten program. As has been referenced many times previously, 47 states fund early childhood opportunities through their public schools. Montana does not. Yet we do have an avenue. The board actually can approve the enrollment of students who are not yet 5 on September 10th through some approved exceptions. And we have therefore conceived that we want to run an early kindergarten program to provide experiences for students who are not yet 5 years old and kindergarten eligible, to help give them a language-rich experience, to help set the stage for successful matriculation to kindergarten. We have secured a grant from the Heman Foundation. We also have some reappropriated Title I dollars, and it's our belief that we'll likely qualify for a budget amendment based on increased enrollment, and that's how we'll fund the initial year. We anticipate opening 2 classrooms. That gives us capacity for 40 students. We're conducting registration presently, and we currently have 31 students registered. We did specific outreach to those neighborhoods that are served by our Title I schools. Again, one of the considerations for us was we want to serve those students who may not have access to other preschools or even to Head Start, and give them an opportunity to have a school-type experience. We will utilize the high-scope curriculum. In addition to a teacher, we'll have a paraeducator in each classroom, so we'll have a 10 to 1 student to adult ratio. We've devised a calendar that will be before the board for approval a little bit later on the agenda. It largely mirrors our early learning program for our students with IEPs. We intend to have our first day of instruction be September 26th. We have already hired 2 experienced teachers, and they're doing the preparation and the professional development in the curriculum right now. And we will be bringing before the board on September 25th the list of students for whom we're recommending early admission to kindergarten so that they can be served in the program. The reason I chose to ask that this be included as an agenda item was to afford you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have, rather than me just do it as part of my superintendent report. So if you do have any questions, direct them through the chair, and I'd be happy to respond.
Trustee Wake, and then Trustee Decker, and then I'll look down this way.
By doing it this way, we are able to collect A and B, is that not correct?
That is correct. As part of the background work, I was in communication extensively last spring with Deputy Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tim Tharp, who's no longer there, but did get a commitment from them in writing that that is how the statute's interpreted, and that given the criteria we've established and given the likelihood of board approval for those early admits, that we would collect A and B.
I'm just curious if you, and maybe this is a question better for Karen, because for people who aren't familiar with the program, the name early kindergarten can be a little misleading, because of course we don't work with, infants the same way we work with toddlers, we don't work with toddlers the same way we work with 4s, we don't work with 4s the same way we work with 5s. So I just was wondering if we could talk a little bit about what some of the particular characteristics and qualities are of an appropriate program for 4s that make it look pretty different than what's happening in kindergarten.
before Karen responds to that, certainly there's a method to our madness. In order to be considered for A and B reimbursement, it has to be kindergarten. So that's why we use that terminology.
So it's very much a program for 4-year-olds that is very much hands-on, very much organized around what would look to us to be play. We have chosen high scope purposefully because it's very organized around language, vocabulary development, concept development, and it will be very active, both in terms of activities, but also in terms of major choice opportunities for kids, because part of what happens to kids in some family situations that aren't as supportive as we wish they could be, kids don't get to have those opportunities to make decisions, make choices, be part of their life development. They look fine, but then when it comes to needing to decide whether it's time to stand up or sit down, whether it's time to play or not play, they don't have all of those skills. So a lot of what we're working on is what are actually called cognitive skills, which are how you think through what you do, being different from, I know this vocabulary word, or I know this picture, or I understand what sounds and letters are about. So certainly there will be lots of sounds and letters going on. I don't want to imply there won't be, but this is a program for 4-year-olds, not for 5-year-olds.
Thank you. And one follow-up question, of course, you know, with children that young, things like self-help skills and their need for rest are quite different. So can you just speak a little bit to what that looks like?
The day is organized around how 4-year-olds operate. They will have opportunity to play outside. They will have opportunity for rest. They will also have opportunity to have their meals together. So they'll be in a family style. And so this is getting kids ready to have the skills when they go to kindergarten to be successful in kindergarten, but you don't do that when you're 4. That's not how you get ready. You get ready by doing the skill development that's appropriate for you.
Well, my question is around age, and Trustee McDonald brought this up. Anecdotally, it seems like there are a lot of people keeping their kids out of kindergarten until they're 6 or close to 6. And I don't know what the percentage is. And so it feels a little bit like, at least until people sort of stop doing that, there's a gap. We've got people who have not put their 5-year-olds into kindergarten, but their 5-year-olds are not eligible for this program either. Or they're kindergarten age, but they're not in kindergarten. But because they're kindergarten age, they're not eligible for this program either. So I just wonder, do we know what percentage of our kindergartners are coming to us essentially at age 6 instead of 5? And are we finding a way to sort of encourage people? We're working to get our 4-year-olds in the system. Are we working to get our 5-year-olds in the system? Because that's my question.
And I appreciate your observation. I will seek the data that you request, but I think you would find that most of the students who are in kindergarten presently are the right age for kindergarten. There was a period of time where a lot of parents chose to redshirt their kids and give them an extra year of eligibility. But we don't see that as predominantly as we used to. So, but we can actually get the data. We have 604 kindergartners in our traditional kindergarten classrooms this year, and it would be relatively easy for us to get the age data.
Any other questions? Trustee Service?
Just want to understand, so they would do kindergarten for 2 years then, is that correct? These kids? No?
Yes, they would move to a traditional kindergarten in year 2.
Okay, that's what I want to understand. Thank you.
Any other questions? All of this is information only. Any public comment? Seeing none, then thank you for that update, and thank you to the board for reminding me to not skip over such an important topic. Now we'll move on to a much more mundane topic, awarding the bid for another acronym, FF&E, which is Furniture, Fixtures, and Equipment for Willard Alternative High School. And Burley, do you want to walk us through the process that is used to obtain the bids, and then who ended up with the identified winning bid packet?
Yeah, sure, thanks. First, I'll make just a clerical error on the side. It's bid pack 1, bid pack 2, and there's actually a bid pack 3, so there's not 2 bid pack 2s. So I apologize for that. But this bid was submitted back in July. We had permission to bid, I believe, back in June from the board, and it gets advertised for 2 weeks, and then we take those responses and we kind of comb through them very carefully. And we had 7 respondents on this, which is probably the most we had in any project, so that's great. That's what we want. And so it took some time for the design team to kind of comb through what was the best cost for the district in regards to what kind of furniture we were going through or going to pick. So we ended up going with 3 different vendors. As you can see, we kind of broke them out into office furniture, classroom furniture, and some commons furniture. We're recommending approving all 3 of those vendors.
Any questions for Burley? Trustee Smith?
Quick question. Thanks for, and I know it's a lot of work for you guys when you get all these bids, looking at them, and I appreciate the work of the team. And having seen what Willwood High School has put up with for furniture for my entire tenure here, I am glad to see them getting some new furniture, finally, along with the new building. Because it's an alternative high school, or just because their programs are a little bit different than our standard high schools, do we look at the furniture differently, and was that taken into consideration for this? Or is this more along the lines of standard, what we've seen in the other high schools?
Yes and yes. So there is some standardized equipment in there, or desks and that kind of stuff in there, but there's also some really neat piece of equipment in our commons area that'll be similar to a very inviting opening area, kind of warm. And I mean, I'm not an architect, I can't throw out too many words, but it's going to be really neat to see how that, because Willard is a very open design floor plan, and it's really neat. And so there's going to be a lot of cool things out in that open area that's going to be something that you might not see in some of their schools.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then is there a motion to award the vendors which are identified in the agenda, which are 360 Office Solutions, Contract Design Associates, and MT Montana School Equipment, the bids in the amounts listed for Willard Alternatives High School's furniture, fixtures, and equipment? Moved by Trustee Kendall and seconded by Trustee Wake. I have to start looking down this way more. Sorry about that. Is there any board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, all trustees in favor of awarding the vendors identified in the agenda for the furniture, fixtures, and equipment at Willard, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to 8B2, which is to grant permission to issue a request for proposal for the sale of the 2 Homevale parcels. And so I don't know if Superintendent Thane or Pat, which person wants to take the lead and which person wants to back cleanup in terms of information?
As has been discussed several times previously, the district is contemplating the potential sale or lease of the Homevale property, which is the property located directly to the north of us. It's the property that was bisected when South Avenue was rerouted. It's technically 2 different parcels. We are putting together a committee that would do 2 things, really. First, evaluate the request for proposal language that we'll draft, and then prepare to bring that back to the board for review and approval at the September 25th meeting. Then secondly, once we get submittals, that committee will evaluate, score the responses, and bring back recommendations for the trustees to consider. So this is the next step in the process. The board previously approved a resolution. It was posted, noticed in the newspaper. It ran for the 14 required days before it became effective. We are in the process right now, per a previous board request, of generating press release regarding the board discussion that will happen around this property. Taking this step of granting administration permission to draft a request for proposal is really twofold. Number one, to continue the conversation in a very public fashion. And then number two, to again begin to answer any questions trustees might have relative to either the sale or lease of that property. Then finally, I would just reiterate that this step does not commit the board to any action with regard to potential sale or lease. The board will evaluate any responses to the proposals, determine whether or not they want to exercise any of those options or negotiate any of those options, and you'll have the full range of responses available to you at that time. You could either take action or you could determine not to take action. You could determine to market it differently if you chose to. So again, in no way does this limit your options. Pat, I don't know if you have anything to add?
Any board questions? Trustee Kendall and Trustee Decker? I'm sorry, is that okay?
I happened to have a conversation recently with a realtor about a different piece of property in Missoula, and the subject of a deed restriction came up, and I don't know if it's too early to have a discussion about that or not, but as a seller, there's a little fly, sorry. I'm just interested to know, in this particular example, the deed restriction went beyond the zoning in that the property owner had a deed restriction or was planning to have a deed restriction which would limit the lot to one structure rather than the two that the zoning would allow. And that made me wonder if there are other ways of using a deed restriction to prevent, something that would be near a high school that the school board would consider to be less than ideal. So I just want to ask that question generally, and if we don't have that information yet, I'd be interested in finding a way to get an answer to that, perhaps through a realtor.
Thank you. And we had some previous conversation about restrictive covenants and the difficulty enforcing that. We haven't had any conversation about deed restriction, but I think one of the values of going through the request for proposal process is that we'll have an opportunity to hear what the intended use might be, and that might be something that we score in terms of determining which of those we consider. I would also say that I think we have a duty as a board, or you do as trustees, to contemplate what gets the highest, best value too. So that's something that you'll have to factor in, and I think the more restrictive we are, the more that value may be diminished. So striking an appropriate balance is important. We will likely have conversation about what the zoning says presently and what uses might be contemplated for that property, but we obviously recognize it's very close to an educational facility, and that's important for us.
This is not necessarily a volunteering comment, but I'm wondering if you have discussed any board member participating on that committee?
We have a committee of 5, so the 2 vice chairs, Ann Wake and Diane Lorenzen, will sit on the committee, and then Burley, Pat, and I. We'll use a process similar to what we've done with our Smart Schools 2020 committees.
Any other questions? I do have one question. Just remind me, at one of the meetings where we were having a conversation about this particular piece of property, and it's actually 2 different pieces even, because suddenly a road was placed in between them. This language here indicates you're looking for an RFP for sale, but does it also allow for lease too in the RFP, or do we not have to put the word lease in because we can lease property in a different way than we can sell property as a district under state law, because I thought we wanted both options to be explored.
The RFP will have lease as an option, yeah.
Any other board questions? Seeing none, then is there a motion to grant the administration permission to issue a request for proposal for the sale or lease of the 2 Homevale parcels? Moved by trustee Wake, seconded by trustee Smith. Is there any board discussion? Seeing none, is there any public comment? If you can come up to
my name is Robert Cole, Bob Cole. If I go out of bounds on some of this because I'm kind of naive about speaking at one of these, just let me know. As far as selling property that the public owns, I'm pretty much against all of it. Once you sell it, you don't have it anymore. So in essence, when the school district, if you find that you have to sell or you have a piece of property that you just cannot use and you want to sell, I guess that's okay. But I would like to see, and I don't know what the rules are as far as the state goes or anything like that, but I'd like to see something like that go into a trust where the money is not used by a particular school board in the general fund just to use for a project selling property. So in essence, it goes into a trust. You can use the interest off of it, but the principal never goes away. Put kind of a check and balance on just selling property because you have a pet project that you want to do. Not that you ever have a pet project, not saying that, but that you have a particular project that this one certain board wants to do. But really, then once that's gone, you've used it in the general fund or whatever for a project, then you never can recoup that again. So I just wanted to put forth that because I have a particular interest in the Cold Springs area, and I would like to know if I can bring that up now to where what you guys think that you're going to do with the properties that you're not, especially the Cold Springs area. I would like to see that stay as either a park or be used some way in the community instead of selling it for residential. But if you did sell it, I'd like to see that money not just go to the general fund. I'd like to see it go to a trust of some sort so that it puts a checks and balance on you guys so that you just don't sell properties or whatever just to use in a quick turnover on your general fund. I guess that's about all I have.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none, and we have a seconded motion, Lenora? Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So all trustees in favor of granting permission to the administration to issue a request for proposal for the sale or lease of the 2 Homevale properties, please indicate by raising your hand. That is unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we move on to C1, which is to approve the personnel report, which begins at page 23. Dave Rott was not able to be here tonight. It appears to be a routine report. If anyone has any questions, Superintendent Thane indicate he could try to answer any questions. Other than that, it is very typical of the personnel reports we see on a monthly basis. Any questions? Seeing none, then is there a motion to approve the items on the personnel report that's found beginning on page 23? Moved by trustee Lorenzen and seconded by trustee Wake. Is there any board discussion? And we don't discuss particular individuals on personnel reports, but if you have any general comments, we're welcome to have a general discussion. Seeing none, and any public comment, the same is true. We don't take public comment on individuals on the personnel report, but we will take general public comment. Seeing none, then all trustees in favor of approving the items on the personnel report that's attached to the agenda, please indicate by raising your hand. And That's unanimous as to all trustees present. Then we get to C2, which to approve the early kindergarten school year calendar. As Superintendent Thane indicated, now that we have a early kindergarten program, they need to have a calendar. So is there anything to add to that, other than why it's lined up the way it is?
Yeah, I would just direct you to page 35. You'd note two things of significance. September 24th, Monday, we'll conduct an open house primarily for those families who have registered, and then class would be initiated on the 26th of September. And again, the calendar mirrors primarily our K-5 and our preschool calendar.
Any questions about the calendar? Trustee Decker?
I'm assuming that the start date was a logistical need for this year, and that future calendars for this program would typically be more in line with the regular start of the school year. That's my assumption, am I right?
That would be correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then this is an elementary action item. So is there a motion from an elementary trustee to approve the early kindergarten 2018-2019 school year calendar? Moved by trustee Decker and seconded by trustee Smith and Lorenzen. Any board discussion? Any public comment?
Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I do just want to, of course I do. So I do want to just say that I'm obviously thrilled that this program is getting started, and everyone that I've talked with so far in the early childhood community is also extremely excited about this, because we all know that the more public support for great quality early education, the better, and better outcomes for kids. I will say that the start of this school year and the timing, it doesn't really connect to the early childhood system. And so this year in particular, it's probably causing some bumps for both families and programs. And I'm glad to hear that next year it's going to be a more typical start. And of course, we'll have more time to get it out there. And everyone, I think, understands that first times and with uncertainties, that's how things go. But most 4-year-olds, they don't just appear out of nowhere. They've been enrolled somewhere else potentially, or they've been scrambling to figure out what they're going to do while their parents are working. And so there's probably a whole lot of domino effect going on out there in the community. We'll kind of keep our ears to the ground and be ready to hear about any of those issues as they come up. Overall, the benefit of this new opportunity so far outweighs those bumps and kerfluffles, but just do know that I think we as a board may end up hearing about that, and people on the ground in the program may end up hearing about some of it. So that's all.
Thanks. Any other comments? Seeing none, any public comment? Seeing none, then all elementary trustees in favor of approving the calendar that's attached to the agenda, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all elementary trustees. If trustee Beers had his hand up, I just couldn't see. Yep. Thank you so much. And now we move on to, sorry, I just flipped my page back. We move on to C3. The other ones had ones and then threes, which is to approve the first reading of a revision to board policy 3310, which is student discipline. And it's found on beginning on page 36. And so I don't know, Superintendent Thane, if you want to describe the changes, or if board council wants to explain why the changes were recommended to the policy. So Megan, if you want.
Hello, everyone. So 3310 is your disciplinary policy that sets basic school rules and the scope of those rules, as well as certain requirements under the law as far as actions. We took a look at this policy to clarify any questions, as well as clear up some issues as far as compliance with current law. And so we noticed there were things that were not exactly in compliance with the law, so that's why the changes are being brought to you now. So you'll see in the first page, in the bulleted list, it's distinguishing between a weapon and a firearm. The reason for that is because that's how the law is written. Montana law criminalizes the possession of a weapon in a school building for anyone except for someone approved by you as the trustees or law enforcement. There's no requirement as far as what the consequences are from the school, aside from criminal liability. Entirely separate from that state law, there's the Federal Gun-Free Schools Act. And that's the act that most individuals are familiar with, where if a student brings a gun to a school, then there's an expulsion requirement. And I say that lightly only because you have some leeway as far as that. In any case, the Gun-Free Schools Act uses the term firearm, not weapon. So we wanted to make sure that it matched the individual laws that had specific definitions. Now, recognizing that kids may bring other things to school that may not fall into either one of those definitions, you see a modification in the bullet point directly below that to just cover anything else. I will tell you that the big issue is BB guns, pellet guns, airsoft guns. Those don't actually qualify as a weapon or a firearm. So this next definition, or this next category, is to allow the district to discipline and potentially the board to expel a student for bringing something that could look like a weapon or be used as a weapon or is capable of inflicting some sort of injury. So then if you get to the next page on 37, you'll see that the language is being revised, and this is because the term weapon as used in the prior version of the policy didn't match the definition in Montana law. So Montana law defines a weapon as a firearm, a knife with a blade of 4 inches or more, a sword, a straight razor, a throwing star, nunchucks, brass or other metal knuckles, or any other article or instrument possessed with the purpose to commit a criminal offense. Like I said, I'd like to think that there's that covers everything, but it doesn't. So that's, like I said, just the criminal piece. And then I think that was it. Oh, we added a definition on page 38, and I believe that reference is just to the issue of tobacco. There's nothing else besides tobacco under that definition. So those are the changes in that particular policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the law on these various issues.
Does anyone have any questions? I have a bunch, so if anyone else wants to jump in first, I'll save mine till last.
On the second part, the possession of a weapon on school grounds, I mean, I can think of something, I think, off the top of my head, where a knife with a blade of 4 inches or more. I mean, we have a kitchen knife that has a blade that's longer than 4 inches, I'm pretty sure. So, how would, or I don't know if there's, you know, if there are any things like that are used at the ag facility or something like that. So how does that fit into this?
So this is a criminal statute, and to be convicted of a crime, you have to have an intent, a criminal intent. I can't recall off the top of my head. Hold on a second. I believe that the term is purpose and knowing under this statute, which means that you do it with the intent, a criminal intent. So I would say that that's a difference between, you know, having, I guess, items in the egg department or in the home ec department. Also, the criminal statute actually can also be applied to the parent. The parent can be charged. You as a board have the option of allowing exceptions. A common exception that I've seen, not in your district but another district, is districts will allow hunter safety courses to be taught in schools, and so they'll allow firearms or other guns to come onto school property for the purpose of teaching safety. And like I said, law enforcement are accepted. Otherwise, it's a criminal statute only, and it doesn't require the school district to take any action.
Well, I was reading this, and I admit I didn't read it ahead of time. So we're talking about essentially alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and then we get down here and we've got unexcused absenteeism, and I know this isn't what we're talking about right now, but it feels like that should be its own policy. I think most of the things that kids struggle with are absenteeism, and it's kind of buried here amongst the nunchucks and the rifles. So I know that's not what we're doing now, but I'm wondering, do we have a policy directly toward that, and et cetera?
Yes, we do have a policy as well as procedural statements all developed around attendance. So that is separate. Again, if you look at the title of 3310, it's student discipline, so it's encompassing much broader than the conversation we're having this evening specific to weapons and firearms, but there is a specific policy about student attendance and specific procedures about how we respond to attendance issues.
Thanks, and I think, well, actually, I'll just ask anyway. Along the lines of cooking knives and whatnot, there's been instances, I mean, a lot of people hunt here, obviously, a lot of people have guns that they might have in the trunk of a car, the car might be parked in a student parking lot. Does the intent and whatever it was apply to that, or does the federal law then take over? Is there the same leeway for a hunting gun if there's no intent, I guess is my question.
So the Montana law on criminalizing that only applies to school buildings, doesn't apply to school property. So the parking lot issue isn't a criminal issue under state law. Federal law, it's not a criminal issue. So it doesn't criminalize the behavior. What it does is it's a condition that the federal government put on the acceptance of federal funds, is that you create a gun-free schools. I don't want to call it zone because that would confuse it with an entirely different law, but gun-free schools areas. That, if you look on, and I realize this isn't being considered for amendment, but if you look under gun-free schools on page 38, you see the board has the authority to modify an expulsion period on a case-by-case basis. That's why I say the expulsion requirement is light, because the board retains the authority to modify the expulsion period on a case-by-case basis.
So am I to understand then that technically speaking, strictly technically speaking, hypothetically or whatever, it says will expel, so we have to expel a student, but it could be for a matter of one period or time served or...
Yeah, it will depend on the nature of the firearm.
Sure.
Again,
Sure,
often what
and
you
all
see
those
is,
issues.
yeah.
But
is
I mean,
that-
on the one end of the spectrum, the
Yes.
most lenient, we have to expel,
You can modify the period of expulsion,
but
correct?
we can modify it. Thanks.
And if I may add, I believe the Gun-Free Schools and Community Act does say school property, so it's not specific to the
Yes.
building. So the parking lot question that you asked does fall under the Gun-Free Schools Act. No, that's the federal. So you would go to expulsion, you could modify it under those circumstances, and we've actually had that experience as a board.
I thought that sounded familiar.
And that's, I should qualify that most students have to be expelled. There is an exception for students with disabilities.
Any other questions? So I have a lot. So, under the fifth bullet point that you're recommending adding in, including look-alike weapons or any object, device, or instrument through which its use is capable of inflicting injury, it indicates in the lead into that discipline action may be taken against any student guilty of the instances set forth below. I'm sitting at Hellgate High School with a fork and a knife in my hand. those are objects that through its use are capable of inflicting injury. Under the terms of this definition, sitting in the cafeteria would allow me to be disciplined because I'd be guilty of being in possession of items that are prohibited. And there's no caveat, whereas under the criminal portion of it, that's on the next page, you mentioned that there's the requirement that the weapon is, or the item that's capable of inflicting injury is intending to harm someone. Can't we add that back over here too?
That is absolutely fine. I've never had that example brought up to me, and
Well,
it's great, and we've had, this is similar language used, so I think that's great to clarify. I would say as far as that example, the checks on that system is that it's an administrative decision on discipline, so there's no automatic.
Right.
So,
I guess
but I have no
hypothetically,
objection
I'm
to
thinking
that.
if two kids don't like each other, one kid reads this policy and says, oh, I can get this guy, brings a complaint and said he looked at me funny and I know he's going to stab me in the eye with his fork, and it actually ends up having to be, there's a lot of discretion as to whether, how you read in, whether looking at you funny is intent to, if we could have something that gives a little meat to help administration say this is not the circumstance that this was intended to cover, I think it helps building administrators to have a better sense of what they'd be looking at before they conclude that there had been a violation of this policy.
Can you tell me again what you were thinking about?
Well, when you get to the section that's identified possession of weapons on a school ground.
No, I know that. You said, can we clarify it with something, and I'm sorry, I just didn't write that down.
Just lift the same language from the criminal section, because it says possessed with the purpose to commit a criminal offense.
Okay. Well,
That's all. Because even though it's not a referral to the police, it seems like if you're going to discipline a student for possessing a fork in a lunchroom, you'd want to give the administration something else to hold as the standard as to when to punish as a disciplinary action and when not to.
I have no problem with that. Can we, though, broaden it to say possess with the purpose to commit a criminal offense or otherwise violate district policy? Because
do what?
Otherwise violate district policy. Because someone could hold up a fork and not do it with the intent to assault, but do it with the intent to intimidate, and that may not be criminal.
I just want to add some teeth so administrators have a sense of, when I read this, it's like, wow, it could be a conduit or allow for some harassment from one student to another if they were busy enough to read our policies in any length, which I'm sure they're not, but it concerned me a little bit. And the second question I had is that I remember when this issue came up in the past, I went back and looked at the Gun-Free Zones Act, and there's an exception under the federal law that allows students to have guns locked in their trunks in parking lots, and yet ours seems to interpret it differently. Has it changed since about 8 years ago when we had that proceeding?
Are you talking about gun-free school zones or gun-free schools? Because they're two entirely different laws.
Okay.
And the Gun-Free School Zones Act does allow, that's the 1,500 feet.
Right.
That's an entirely separate issue than the Gun-Free Schools Act. So I haven't looked at that in a long time. I'm happy to look at that again, but I just want to be careful as far as making sure we're.
And the only reason I ask is because Trustee Smith asked about it, and I know that at the time the attorney representing the student argued that the federal law allowed him to do exactly what he was doing, and yet he was being expelled for doing what the federal law allowed. And I haven't really looked at the federal law since that hearing, but at that time, his attorney was correct about the current status of federal law. So maybe we could check into that. And then the last thing, which is not highlighted, but I'd still like to consider it, or two things, sorry. The third thing is, I'm not sure whether there's a way, this is under the 3300s and it's under students, and then it's under student discipline as one of the two topics. Then it's under, there's a second topic, disciplinary measures. Then there's the third topic, possession of a weapons on a school ground. And suddenly, if you're an administrator in school and someone walks into the school with a weapon, how do you know that under the section that addresses students, buried halfway into it, that it turns out that the district has to refer to law enforcement for immediate prosecution? Any person, not a student, but any person who comes into a district building, how do we let people know that that's where you go to find out that this is not just applying to students, but to any person who comes into a school building? Is there a better
Actually, I believe that's also tied into the community policies, and I don't have the number in front of me, but there is a section in the community section that prohibits possession of a weapon. And one of the other items we're bringing before the trustees tonight is addition to the personal conduct policy so that staff would
teachers,
also be
right.
covered.
So I was wondering if there's some, just like little parenthetical, we can say any person, and then parenthetically, see board policy number for member of the public, see board policy number for a staff member.
I think the best place to do that is in the cross references. So that's easily done.
Final thing is something just we lawyers nitpick more than anyone, and no one else probably cares about this, but in the last section, which is underlined gun-free schools, it says the board will expel, and will is a word that you don't see in the law very much. You either see may or shall, and when it's may, it's discretionary, and you don't have to do it, but you can under the right circumstances. When it says shall, you got to do it, and there are no exceptions. And this word will, if it ever is litigated, it doesn't have any legal meaning to it. So do you know why our statute uses the word will?
You mean policy?
I mean, see, our policy uses the word will.
I do not. I would say that was something that was probably adopted back in 2005, and I will be honest and say I didn't catch it. There's a lot of uses of wills that I just don't necessarily catch, only when I'm rewriting that particular section that then I change it to may and shall. But since we're already looking at this policy, that's easy enough to change.
Because I was thinking it makes more sense, at least in terms of arguing against a challenge to this particular section, especially in Montana, or in areas where gun ownership is considered an important opportunity. If it says the board may expel any student, and the board may, so the board may expel any student, and something like, and the expected outcome is that the student would be expelled, but then you put in the modify. But it's like, now the board is told you have to kick him out, but oh wait, you don't really have to kick him out at all. It bothers me as an attorney to have it kind of wishy-washy, so I'm just trying to fix it so it would be more understandable if it's ever challenged, in a proceeding of some kind.
Aside from changing it to shall, is there something
Shall is
else?
worse than will. I'd just change it to may. Yeah.
But we are required.
I was gonna say.
Well, that's why I was asking, is this language from a statute that says will?
I don't know off the top of my head, and I don't have it open, the Gun-Free Schools Act, what exactly the language of the statute says, but it is a mandatory expulsion requirement that may be modified, the period may be modified. So I get that it's confusing, it is completely confusing.
Right, this says, could we say, shall expel any student who uses, and the expected or statutory period of expellment is 1 calendar year. However, the board may modify that if that's what the statute says. That's what it does say in the policy. The board may modify. Yeah, but it's just, the first sentence says you have to kick them out for a year. It's just an affirmative statement that you have to kick them out for a year. The very next sentence says, oh no, you don't. So I just wanted it to read a little more clear, so administration and even students and staff have a better understanding of the length of expulsion. It really is just about the length of expulsion.
Before I answer, I want to go back to the statute and make sure that I'm closely following the statutory
Right, I mean,
language.
sometimes the legislature's written statutes are not that well written, but we're required by law to follow them anyway, so we will.
And like I said, I get that this is completely confusing and seems very counterintuitive, but it's the way that the law was written, and I think it was probably done hastily. And
I just know the only time this has been litigated when I've been on the board, we spent 3 hours trying to sort this out, and it took up a lot of time to try to figure out, and the young student had an attorney that had a really good argument as to how to interpret this, and I'd like to have it be clearer for situations like that. And then I saw Trustee Wake wanted.
Okay, I'm not an attorney, but I have a question. Can't you just simply say the board can modify, rather than say may? They can, they have the option of doing this, correct?
In the law, may means can, so that's not the problem. It's the first statement that says you're out for a year. And the second statement says, oh no, you can think about it and change it. But I think Megan can work out and just check out the language of the statute.
It's must
Pat.
be in the statute is what the.
Must?
There you go, throw a third term in there.
Well, just to be safe, if the statute says must, I'd say use that term. Let the lawyers argue whether it means shall or may, but at least we're consistent with the statute, so.
What I would like to suggest then is, with the comment about the hunting rifles
Right.
locked in the car, as well as the change on the, I'm gonna call them the look-alike weapons, that I look at changes to this and then bring it back, and that nothing be done tonight.
I just wanted to highlight some of my concerns. This isn't something that's pressing right now, so it's being proposed on first reading, but we have frequently in the past, when we've had questions, be able to have the first reading occur later after we've had legal counsel have an opportunity to tell us, what language is required and what language we might be able to modify a bit. So I appreciate that. Did you have a question?
Are we questioning or are we discussing?
We're questioning right now, because the question is, are we going to actually take a motion to have it on First Amendment, or is the board going to have a motion to ask council to review it again and bring it back?
Okay.
So we're just asking questions right now. Anyone else have any questions? Trustee Beers?
Yeah, you mentioned briefly an exception for students with disabilities, and I guess I would just like a little more detail on which law gives that exception, and kind of a brief overview of why that exists.
If I could jump in, we actually, I believe in policy reference it, and I can't cross-reference it right now, but you have to do a manifestation determination before you carry forth any discipline there. So a determination needs to be made by the IEP team whether or not the behavior is a manifestation of the student's disability before you proceed. So that exception exists.
Thank you.
I just want to add, so the rules about students with disabilities and discipline applies to any, we call it change in placement, that's over 10 days. So if a school seeks to suspend a student out of school longer than 10 days, or even under the Gun-Free Schools Act, has to expel, the rules are different with students with disabilities. And in fact, if a student with a disability were to bring a firearm to school, and there's a determination that that conduct is a result of the student's disability, then that student will never come before the board for expulsion. So the Individuals with Disabilities Act actually trumps the Gun-Free Schools in this situation. But it applies to any discipline action, including gun-free schools violations, where there is a change of placement of a student sought more than 10 school days.
Other questions? And so I'll leave it up to the board. Would anyone on the board want to make a motion to have it be returned to council to consider the modifications, and then we'll hear it again, or hear it at another time on first reading? Moved by Trustee Duggar. Is there any second? Seconded by Trustee McDonald. Or any board comment? Trustee Duggar?
We're commenting now on this motion?
Right, to let the Caliva Law Office and I don't know whether it's Megan or Bea or both worked on it, but anyway, to answer some of the questions that we raised and then bring back either the same version with question or explanations to why it has to stay the same, or make the slight modifications that were requested. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So,
Come on.
okay.
Okay, so I actually just want to second Marcia's call for trying to find a way to incorporate some of the language about intent over in the list of things on this side. And the reason for that, for me, is because of implicit bias that exists in all people, but that is really, the research is showing more and more that it's an issue in schools. One of the strongest indicators that a child is in danger of being expelled in school is being a boy and being big and being black. And so we need to be paying attention to making sure that we are really clear about what those things are that are and aren't weapons, because teachers with the best of intentions in heated moments will read situations very differently with certain students than with others, and so we have to be super duper clear about what it is that we're looking at.
I guess mine's more procedural question on the motion. The motion is to ask them to reword it and bring it back to us. I guess my question is, do we even need a motion for that?
Well, we're tabling, I mean, it came as an agenda item that we take action on, so unless, I mean, we have our attorney here, so I was thinking that it's basically a motion to table it and send it back for revisions, because it was anticipated that we would be acting on it tonight. Do we need a motion for that?
It's really up to you. You're not bound by the Roberts Rules of Orders. I've certainly seen boards do it both ways, so however you as a board prefer to do it.
I prefer just to have it cleaner where we actually, as a group, decide whether or not it needs to be looked at. Yeah, do you mind a friendly amendment to the motion? That the motion is that we not decide it tonight, table it, send it back to council for possible revision. Okay, and so seconded? Okay. Any board discussion now that we've heard from Trustee Decker? Any other board discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, then all those in favor of tabling the first reading of board policy, I've lost the number again, 3310, and asking board council to review it with an eye toward the revisions and the discussion that we had tonight, please indicate by raising your hand. That's unanimous as to all trustees present. Thank you for letting me take the time to ask those questions. And then we move on to, let me just make sure I'm back on the right. We move on to 4, which is to approve the first reading of revision to Board Policy 5224, which is personal conduct. And that's found under the personnel section of the board policy, Board 5224, which is personal conduct, and it's added in 7 to kind of mirror what we have in the board policy we were just talking about.
Correct, but based upon the input from the trustees on the last policy, I think it makes sense to take similar action on this policy as far as the intent issue on this capable of inflicting injury. And so in that situation, I think the language should mirror the student policy language on that and add the intent element.
Okay. Are there any questions for Megan? So as I hear it, board council is suggesting that there be a motion to table this in order to have it be considered in conjunction with the earlier board policy. Is there such a motion to do so? Moved by trustee Duggar and seconded by trustee Decker. So any board discussion? Seeing none. Any public comment? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to table this first reading of personnel or board policy 5224 and allow legal counsel to review it with the eye toward making it consistent with the prior policy, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's everyone here. Thank you so much. Then we move on to, now I know these were the ones that were transposed, so let me just make sure. On the agenda item, we're talking about board policy 3221, which is really found on page 44. So the recommendation is to approve this on first reading. And so, Megan, I have some questions, but I don't know if you want to, and I'm sure some others might as well, but do you want to just update us on why the recommendations are coming to us at this point?
Sorry, as I'm looking at the policy, it's different than the version I was familiar with. So, there's been lots of things that we've been looking at, and so I'm just wondering, the reason why it stands out to me right now, even though I had looked at it before, was that I didn't see any of my underlines. If you'll indulge me for just one moment.
Well, maybe I can offer a suggestion. I have some questions about the language here too that I was going to ask to have this revisited. So since it might not even be the one that was recommended by legal counsel, that might be a particularly wise decision. But I'll just throw out the questions that I had, and it may be remedied by what the other version is. But in the first portion about publications and distribution, when the sentence starts, such materials may not be libelous, obscene, or profane, and then it goes on to describe things. When you get into the distribution of written materials posted by, not necessarily school-sponsored publications, but things that are allowed in the school, the words all change. So now it's obscene, vulgar, libelous, infringes on a copyright, but wouldn't we want our school-sponsored publications not to be including copyright infringement? So it seemed like you'd want those to be much more parallel, because one's talking about obscene, the other one's talking about vulgar. One wants to prohibit copyright infringement when it's not a teacher, but when it's a teacher, it's not mentioned. So I was a little confused, but that may be remedied by the fact that this might not be the most current version.
I believe it is. Of course, I'll go back and before we resubmit it, but as I'm looking at a version that I was working on, and I'm not entirely sure what happened, that entire first section, including the such materials, would be changed.
Okay. So, would anyone want to make a motion that we table the first reading of 3221 in order to allow one, to make sure that we're looking at the version that was most recently drafted that came to the district, moved by trustee Wake and seconded by trustee Duggar, because no one down there is raising their hand anymore because I keep trying to look down there and I have to look past people. Any board discussion about the motion to table? Trustee Duggar.
One comment, and you may already know this, heads up on the invasion of privacy. So a heads up on this language in here as you look at it a second time on the invades the privacy of others. If we're trying to align with the Montana statute on this, there is a part of the statute, and I can't recall which part, that the Montana Supreme Court found void for vagueness. So you might want to look at that to make sure that it's explicitly, whatever needs to be explicit in that part in the invasion of privacy gets included in the language here.
What statute was that?
It's invasion, it's a privacy, it's the use of electronic devices
okay.
to invade somebody's privacy
Okay.
by using vulgar or obscene language. I can't remember the statute number, but there's a part of the statute that the Montana Supreme Court said, can't use it.
I'll certainly take a look.
If you would. It's not the whole statute, it's just that one piece.
And I'll read the opinion. I'm sure I read it at the time, but
Okay, just a
gone.
heads up, and I'm just, I don't know why I'm remembering it, but it's,
But generally, I would say that this district is not necessarily bound, because if that was a criminal, that use of electronic is a criminal. And so this district can impose different standards, but
Sure.
I will absolutely take that into consideration. The other thing I do want to add is the policy changes are actually looking at both sections, both the student publications piece and the distribution of materials. So in the one that you see, there's no changes to the publications. That's going to be part of what you're going to see as far as the revision.
Yeah, the statute does cover not just electronic, but any written material, including electronic. So, yeah.
Any other board comment? I think we've got a seconded motion at this point. Okay, so we're on board comment. Seeing no more, is there any public comment? Seeing none, then all those in favor of tabling the first reading of, oh, sure.
Community relations. So I noticed the strike through.
That's the next one, yeah. We're gonna get,
Oh, okay, excuse me, sorry, that was my fault.
Okay, so no public comment, so now all those in favor of tabling the first reading of Board Policy 3221, please indicate by raising your hand. And that's unanimous as to all trustees present, and I'll note that Trustee Kendall and Trustee Newbold had other obligations that they left for. And then we do move on to number 6, which is to approve the first reading of the revision of Board Policy 4331, which uses school property for posting notices, and this actually is found on page 42. And so I will note that I didn't catch it, but Superintendent Thane did, that in the second paragraph, which begins outside groups, the first sentence says parent organizations not sponsored by the school. No parent organizations are sponsored by the school, so maybe the suggestion would be just to strike that language as a friendly amendment that might not need too much discussion. And then in the very next sentence, it says, for posting materials and/or table. But it really means a table, not table it, but put a table out so it can be there. So just adding the letter A for a table. Those were two things that Superintendent Thane and I had discussed earlier. So with those friendly amendments, now do you want to let us know the recommendations that you're making?
Just, I was trying to pull up the version I sent just to make sure, but my computer is not liking this. So the intent of this was to change a couple of things. One, the previous version was actually in conflict with 3221. 4331 set up a procedure for, or a policy as far as community groups bringing in materials that required it to go through the school principal. 3221 actually required materials coming in to go through the business office. So the intention was to actually unify them so that they're not in conflict, and require that the building level administrators make decisions. The reason why these are treated different than school sponsored is about First Amendment issues. It's, to get into the legal, I guess, weeds, it's about the forum. Is that you don't want to open up the forum for any and all discourse. So you want to be able to limit what your students can see. And it's not about limiting the viewpoint, it's about limiting the content so that it's appropriate for students, and in following with this board's policies and principles. And so the purpose is to set the standards for what's not acceptable, as well as how outside organizations can get materials into the school. And when they're not handed out directly to students, you do it through some sort of bulletin board or table that they can place them on.
Would this policy be the kind of place where it would make sense to have language about organizations that were going to display materials in this way being in compliance with other policies that the school district has adopted, for example, non-discrimination types of policies? And just questions about, whether religious organizations may display, questions about whether organizations that advocate certain educational types of programs that might be controversial in what they would be re-education, you sort of see where I'm going. There's a whole lot of organizations that might want to put information in front of students. Not all of those organizations would meet the umbrella of the kinds of policies that this school board has strongly affirmed in the past. So I'm curious as to whether it would be appropriate to put that here, or if our non-discrimination policies as they already stand kind of umbrella over all of this.
I have no objection to referencing your non-discrimination policy. As far as your issue about other groups, the answer is generally yes. They get to display their materials. Once you allow any outside organization to come in, you can't really limit aside from where there's a violation of law or where it's promoting something that you can control. And there's a legal term, we call it the imprimatur, that it bears the imprimatur of the district. So meaning that if someone were to look at this, do they think it's coming from the school? We have the disclaimer in there, but still, this is a First Amendment balancing issue. And so as far as content, the district has to be very, very cautious in how if it chooses to limit materials. So controversial issues generally, unless here's one thing I can say that probably would not be permitted to be displayed in a school, things about marijuana and medical marijuana. They're very controversial, but because there's a federal law that prohibits the use of marijuana, we would say no because it promotes illegal activity. Not to say that students wouldn't be interested, but it's a legal issue. But if it's about a teaching methodology, maybe not, because there's no legal basis to say no.
Thanks. We've had some issues brought up to us about like the cap and gown and the distribution of those things. Those things are handed out, and this is limiting outside groups to a table and a bulletin board. So does this affect the distribution that go out with those other things, or what's the exception for those?
I would say that those, I call them the Jostens.
Right.
I believe there's a contract with them. They're essentially school sponsored, so that's why they get sent home. This doesn't change the practice, by the way. Your previous policy already had the creation of the bulletin board and the table.
I understand. I just want to make sure, because this is going to come back and be brought up.
Yes, but those are school sponsored essentially.
And school sponsored meaning?
Well,
can you define that, I guess?
This is the one exception that I can think of where you're limited in who can provide the caps and gowns. And I'm not sure what else they provide, but
I guess it's not just the Jostens, but I guess I want to make sure that it's a fair playing field for everyone. I don't know if I have another good example that doesn't come across as the wrong way. Let's say the YMCA is going to have a basketball league. Do they get to distribute stuff because of some special arrangement with the school? Whereas if my church had a league that wasn't associated, is there a difference there?
no.
So the YMCA doesn't get any kind of special, they would have to, but the only people that get to distribute are school-sponsored things. So like Flagship, Key Club, Flagship, those are school-sponsored. Right, and I like that. Okay, I just want to make sure that it's clear because I have people coming to me and asking me what they're doing, why can't I do it? And how, is there okay, let me expand this, and maybe I should have this discussion someplace else. Actually, as I'm saying this, I'm probably getting beyond this policy. So I'm going to stop here and bring it up at a different time.
And let me ask perhaps Superintendent Thane, I think this is talking about items that meet certain definitions in written materials that we as a board don't want in our schools. it's my understanding there are procedures in place in terms of building administrators making decisions about how and when materials can be distributed, but that's a procedures decision, not something that we'd want to include in board policy at the, like the 4,000-foot level. So
That's accurate. Really, the genesis of this is what Trustee Smith described, and that is it used to be that on Thursday afternoons we sent envelopes home with all the kids K-8, and all kinds of groups and agencies that may not have been affiliated with the school had flyers that went in there, and parents got under home, and the interpretation was these were being sanctioned by the school in some way, shape, or form because we did the distribution. So that process has been stopped. Outside groups, we don't send flyers home to a captive audience. They have to have some kind of relationship with the school district. The concession essentially was to say, if you're one of those entities and you've got your Kiwanis Basketball League or whatever, there's a bulletin board where you can post that, or there's a table where you can have those materials, but it has to go through an approval process. Once the policy is revised, we'll go back through and review and revise administrative regulations and apprise all our administrative team of what the protocol should be.
Do you still have your question?
I noticed in the strike through it does mention about the class rings, and I know that Jostens, I don't know if the policy has changed, but Jostens has used class time to market their materials, and then it also goes home as well. So, and it's not distributed on the boards or anything like that. And I remember last year there was a letter of dissent from a parent talking about they didn't want class time to be used for Jostens marketing. So I was wondering if this policy, since it excludes class rings, would parents use this to complain about Jostens marketing? Because it has been brought up in the past, and they are doing it during class time.
And actually, the direction that we gave to all our high school administrators, it's supposed to be happening outside of class time, and it's voluntary participation. So it could be at the lunch hour, it could be before school, after school, those kinds of things.
Any other questions? Trustee Decker? Sure.
So I guess I'm just still kind of clarifying on my point about materials falling under our kind of umbrella of non-discrimination, really. Because I guess what I'm hearing is that materials that are to be submitted are going to be reviewed by the building level people. And yet, if we allow materials from one type of organization, we would have to allow materials from potentially a conflicting type of organization. And so it's up to the building level principal to make the determination about whether those materials are okay to display or distribute or not. And that building principal would presumably be using our sort of code of community standards as MCPS to be making those determinations. So that, for example, an organization that, you know, was wanting to have a club, but, you know, no, for American-born people only, for example, let's have that kind of club, or an organization that was, you can think of many different types of examples. I don't know of such a club, but I'm just trying to get at what guidance our policies are giving building level people to make those decisions, because it's possible to imagine lots of thorny water.
As Mark and Marcia mentioned, that's really a procedural issue and a training issue. I don't think that level of detail as far as, you know, taking a look at this and looking at it. The hope would be is if there's something that makes them question, is this okay, that they would seek guidance. But where caution has to be exercised is looking at, you have to take out your personal biases essentially, and saying, even though I might disagree with this, is this something, if it's open to school-age children? Now, you know, we've had the question of they want to advertise an adult volleyball league. Nothing objectionable about that, but you wouldn't hand that out at school. But if it's something that they're encouraging students about, I think we have to be very cautious and take into account First Amendment issues. And like I said, that's a procedures and training issue.
If I might add also, compliance with other district policies would be one of the standards we would hold in terms of procedure statements.
And that was, I was going to just make a suggestion, not because this is particularly complicated, but because it would be nice to determine whether you use profane or vulgar, and, you know, just have all these policies come back as one. And two, I was just wondering if in the last sentence of the second paragraph, it says, material is appropriate, could you add in there under board policy and meets the standards under this written policy, or in a different way, for distribution of written materials established in board policy? And, you know, then the assumption is if there's a cross-reference to something that administrator has that indicates that there's a different board policy, that, you know, there's no reason to allow adult male volleyball, you know, flyers to be in kids' backpacks.
My concern about the policy issue is that you can't the policy is you can't discriminate on the grounds of religious basis. But when we allow outside groups to come in, they can discriminate. And I'm not saying that they're doing it on but any group, by discrimination, I mean a decision. Discriminate is making a decision on some basis. So a classic example is Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And they are discriminating on the basis of sex, I believe. I've never looked at their standards, but I don't know if a girl can join Boy Scouts. They can? Okay, that's good.
Those organizations have actually modified their
That's good.
membership.
We just have to be very careful, because there are religious groups that can use this they can use school facilities, for example, for Bible study. And they could tell someone, well, you don't believe the same as us, so why are you here? I want us to be very careful so that we're not engaging in any viewpoint discrimination. That's really what this is about. It's about First Amendment principles. So I want to, before I agree to fully apply your policy, because your policy applies to you, this is applying to other groups and what they're doing, and that's where I think we just need to be careful. So I just need to look into that a little more.
So just, you know, two things. It says materials in that last sentence, the building principal will determine whether the materials are okay to ensure the material is appropriate. But what's appropriate? I mean, it doesn't really have a definition. It really just is this vague, building principal gets to decide what's appropriate. But and these are separate considerations. So anyway, maybe we can send it back and there's a better definition than appropriate, or take out that term and just say that ensure the material meets the standards that are in this policy, and that's not that vague term. And then just because in case we need to add in or subtract any language from the definition of the materials that we're making non-distributable in other policies, would anyone want to make motion to table this just so that it all travels together? So moved by trustee Wake. Is there a second? I didn't mean to stop board discussion, but I was just thinking it seemed like a good stopping point. Seconded by trustee Duggar. Any board discussion? Yes. Trustee Decker?
I know I'm sort of harping on this, but I feel like this is, there's a lot that comes into this particular piece, and the idea of inconsistent with shared values of a civilized social order, that means such very different things to very different people. What I consider to be inconsistent with those values might be quite different than what someone else. I think there's a lot of vagueness and a lot of interpretation in here, and I think building level people are at risk of having to make very difficult determinations about who can and can't display stuff on a bulletin board in school. Yeah.
That's a really good point, and that comes into play in 3221 as well. So maybe anyway, I as a comment, I would agree just to take a look at the whole package again, because I hadn't caught that before, but that's a really broad and open to great interpretation, like ban on the distribution of materials as well as posting of materials and bringing them out. So any other board comment? Any public comment? Hey.
I was just going to add, and I'm happy to take a look at all of this and appreciate all of your feedback. The language comes usually from case law, and I completely get, and so I will do case law on as far as the, shared values or inconsistent with the shared values of a civilized social order. I can't name the... No, it's just, the reason why it's often used is because that's what the court said. And so it's consistent with the precedent, but I completely understand from your side of reading this and saying, what does that mean? So I'll come back to you with some suggestions. It may be, I advise leaving the language, but then we use the procedures to flesh it out. But I'm happy to take a look at all of this.
Any other public comment?
Again, I would just come back to the purpose and intent. And, the easy solution would be to say we're not going to provide a bulletin board or a table. But we do get inquiries from parents sometimes about what are some activities my child can be engaged in. Well, we can refer them to the bulletin board or the table, and there may be flyers for YMCA soccer or Kiwanis basketball, etc. The question is, how do you discern what's appropriate and what's not? And that's the challenge of the policy. So just as we contemplate a redraft, I think what's important is to consider what is it we're intending to accomplish, and can we focus the policy narrow enough to accomplish that without opening Pandora's box?
Any other public comment? Seeing none, then all those in favor of tabling this proposed first reading of this board policy for consideration once it's been reviewed by council, then please indicate by raising your hand. And that's all trustees present. And with that, we reach the final item on the agenda, I believe, which is public comment again on non-agenda items. We offer that opportunity at the beginning and the end of every meeting. Any board comment or public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing no one shaking their head, yes, we are adjourned, and thank you for being here.